Alright, so here we have the Dynam motor. It's model BM2815A Kv100. So you can see this shaft is broken off here when we had a prop strike on a landing. There's the propeller and the shaft still stuck in the back of that. So what we're going to do here today is hopefully replace this broken shaft with the replacement shaft and make this back into a working motor. So the replacement shaft is a Dynam replacement shaft, part 2815. If you Google that, you should be able to find these readily available. It's 3 millimeters in diameter. It's 61 millimeters long. The last 14 millimeters are threaded. This small key for the grub screw to sit on is cut from 30 through 34 millimeters from the end, which has this small C-clip ring right here, E-clip ring right here. Each of these motors contains 2 very small bearings, and each of these bearings is 8 millimeters across, 4 millimeters high, and the inside diameter is 3 millimeters. So first thing we want to do is we're going to start with the prop and retrieve the rest of our shaft here. And we're going to actually make use of this little broken piece here in a minute. So first part, we see that there's a small E-clip on the very back of the motor here, and that's what holds the shaft from coming forward. Underneath it is a small brass thrust washer. So to save the E-clip, I'm going to use a gallon Ziploc bag here. Get inside here with the flat blade screwdriver and pop the clip off from the shaft, like so. Okay, and separate the motor, being sure to catch the brass thrust washer off the back. So there they are, trapped inside my Ziploc bag here and here. The Ziploc bag keeps them from flying across the living room, making you crawl around and look for them. So now we've separated the motor into the 2 parts. This part containing the broken shaft, and right here is the small grub screw that holds the shaft in place. So we're taking our Allen wrench, metric one, and loosening the grub screw. Okay, and usually take it all the way out. Let's see if I can get it here. There it is. Set that aside for later. Now sometimes the shaft can just be pulled right from the motor. Other times fights back a little bit. So what I do there is I take a socket. This one happens to be 15/16, and it happens to sit nicely on that. I take a C-clamp, and I use the C-clamp to press the shaft down into the motor. I use the socket to catch the shaft and leave a void for the shaft to fall into. Now the shaft doesn't always want to come out completely. That's when you take your little piece of the broken shaft, press on the top, and out pops the shaft. Okay, so now we're going to inspect the bearings in the motor. And here's the top bearing. It's looking in pretty good shape. And there's the other one underneath. Now if you need to remove these, I find usually the top one's easier to get out. So we'll start with the Allen wrench again, working on an angle through the bottom bearing. We'll press up against the sides of the top bearing, up the top, working our way around until the bearing pops free. And you pull it out by hand. And if we were to go get that one, we'd find that the bearing is in good shape. You check the top and the bottom, make sure that there's no obvious scars or marring to the can. Okay. Now the bottom one, it's usually a little tougher to get out of there. So what we do there is we take the Allen wrench, and since the top bearing is no longer there, the hole down the middle is a little bit larger. We pass the larger Allen wrench through and up against the bottom, applying slight pressure. If it doesn't want to come out, then again we're going to take the C-clamp and we'll take the motor on there, place the small socket on top to catch the bearing. Open up our C-clamp. Okay, now it's not quite going to work, so we'll have to press it out first without the socket on there to catch it. We'll press it out into the void in the C-clamp and slip it on me. So we'll try this again. Okay. The bearing is starting to come up now. See if we can apply just a little pressure. And out pops the bearing. And take a look at this bearing. Again, looks in pretty good shape. So we'll reuse that one. So these are usually a little tougher to get in. So again, we're going to place in the larger socket, using the C-clamp once again. Press that bearing. Back into the spot. Like so. Now that bearing won't want to go all the way down. It's slightly raised. So then I use a centerpiece from, I think it's a Great Plains prop. Place that on top. And then back off the C-clamp a little bit. And placing that back into the C-clamp. Put the prop adapter in place. It's a little difficult to line up. But once it lines up, pressure, and the bearing will seat the rest of the way down. Now you're ready for bearings in place. Now you're ready for the top bearing. So we'll go ahead, and this one usually just pops in by hand. All right, so now we're ready to take the shaft and put the C-clip, the E-clip, back on the back of it. Place it back on the slot on the rear of the shaft. Thrust washer back over the shaft down to the end. Okay. Passing it from the bottom up. Find where the key mark is. Line that up with your grub screw hole. Fix it on so it gets as far as it can go. And once again, this time I have a 13mm socket. I'll place over the top. And since we're pressing against the top of the motor and not the bearings, we can do it in this fashion. Let's flip around. Just slight pressure on the C-clamp. Presses the bearing right into place. And the shaft is now where we need it to be. Now I'm looking down the grub hole. I'm looking for the flat part of the shaft to come around. There, it's visible now. So I'll go ahead and take my grub screw here. Screw it down in place. Tighten it securely. And there we have the completed fixed motor.